We're all incredibly deluded, and here's why. We like to think we make rational and logical choices when it comes to decision making, our likes and dislikes, and even our thoughts and beliefs, but in some cases that couldn't be further from the truth. Let's start with how our likes and dislikes can be determined by some of our huge psychological flaws. Now, if I were to ask you to rate a particular experience, whether it be a holiday, a ride at a theme park, or even a painful medical procedure, you simply have to recall the experience and rate it based on your memory, which should be accurate, right? Well, let me introduce you to you, what psychologists call your two selves. The experiencing self, which is you when experiencing an experience, and the remembering self, which is you a while later who has a recollection of that experience. The remembering self and the experiencing self can have profound contradictions. Take this study as an example. In this experiment, participants were exposed to 2 cold water episodes where they held one hand in painfully cold water until they were asked to remove it. At the same time, they used their free hand to control arrows on a keyboard to provide a continuous record of the pain they were experiencing, which was direct communication with the experiencing self. They endured 2 episodes. The short episode consisted of 60 seconds of immersion in water at 14 degrees Celsius, which is experienced as painfully cold, but not intolerable. At the end of the 60 seconds, they were instructed to remove their hand and were offered a warm towel. The long episode lasted 90 seconds. The first 60 were the same as the short episode, but after the first minute, a valve was opened that allowed slightly warmer water to enter the tub, raising the temperature by roughly 1 degree, just enough for most subjects to detect a slight decrease in the intensity of the pain. The participants were told they would endure 3 cold water episodes, but at the end of the 2 episodes, they were asked which one they would endure again. 80% of them chose the longer trial, declaring themselves willing to suffer 30 additional seconds of needless pain. Here we see a massive contradiction in what we experience and what we remember of what we experience. These people were not freaky or masochists. They simply followed their memory of the least painful experience. Tastes and decisions are shaped by memories, and the memories can be wrong. There are 2 main factors that determine the rating. Firstly, the peak end rule, which states that the entire retrospective rating can be well predicted by the average level of joy or pain at the best or worst moment of the experience and at its end. The second factor is called duration neglect, which states that the duration of the procedure has very little or no effect whatsoever on the ratings of the experience. The evidence presents a profound challenge to the idea that humans have consistent preferences and know how to maximize them. A memory that neglects duration will not serve our preference for long pleasure and short pains. Confusing experience with the memory of it is a compelling cognitive illusion. The experiencing self does not have a voice. The remembering self is sometimes wrong, but it is the one that keeps score and governs what we learn from living, and it is the one that makes the decisions. What we learn from the past is to maximize the quality of our future memories, not necessarily of our future experiences. This is the tyranny of the remembering self. Not convinced that we're deluded? Well, we're only getting started, baby. Imagine you have 2 systems in your brain, System 1 and System 2. System 1 automatically and quickly processes vast amounts of information without your knowing. It allows you to go into an autopilot mode, such as driving down an empty road or brushing your teeth, but it also cannot be turned off. System 2 allocates attention to the effortful mental activities that demand it, including complex computations. When we think of ourselves, we identify with System 2, the conscious self. System 2 jumps in whenever System 1 cannot provide an answer, such as when trying to calculate 17 times 24. But System 2 is also lazy. Let me give you an example. A bat and ball cost $1.10. The bat costs $1 more than the ball. How much does the ball cost? The intuitive answer that comes to mind incredibly quickly of 10 cents is wrong. Most people give this answer, and the failure to check is remarkable since the cost of checking is so low, but we don't like to think. System 2 is lazy. Now, let's look at these 2 lines. Which one is longer? Clearly the bottom line. I mean, obviously the bottom line. This isn't a trick question. Except it is, I'm a liar. The lines are the same length. Now, imagine how many intuitions we are fed by our System 1s that we internalize due to not questioning their validity. Now, you might say when you sit down and consciously deliberate, you come up with a sound and logical answer and come up with a decision. Well, hold your horses again, sunshine, and listen to this study. German judges with an average of 15 years of experience first read a description of a woman caught shoplifting. They then rolled a dice that was rigged to roll on a 3 or a 9. It must have been some kind of funky 10 or 12-sided dice. They were then asked if they would give a prison sentence less or more than the months indicated on the dice, and then they were asked to specify an exact prison sentence. Those who rolled a 3 sentenced her to an average of 5 months. The ones who rolled a 9 sentenced her to an average of 8 months. The judges knew that the number they had rolled had nothing to do with the sentencing. Clearly, it had an effect on them that they were not aware of. The number on the dice acted as an anchor, and the effect of anchors has been well documented by psychologists. Some biases have a clear evolutionary advantage that I will talk about later. But first, let's talk about our need for causality and coherence. Take the sex of 6 babies born in a hospital. Which sequence is the most likely? The answer is that all of them are equally as likely as each other, but the last one is judged as more likely than the other two. We are believers in a coherent world in which regularities do not appear by accident but as a result of mechanical causality or someone's intention. We do not expect to see regularity produced by a random process, and when we detect what appears to be a rule, we quickly reject the idea that the process is truly random. Finally, let's look at an incredibly interesting example of priming. In an experiment at New York University, students aged mostly between 18 and 22 were asked to construct a 4-word sentence from a set of 5 words. For one group of students, half the sentences were scrambled with words associated with the elderly, such as forgetful, bold, grey, or wrinkle. Important to note, however, the word old was never mentioned. When they had completed that task, the experimenters were asked to do another experiment in an office down the hall. That short walk was what the experiment was truly about. The experimenters unobtrusively measured the time it took them to get from one end of the corridor to the other. The participants, who had fashioned a sentence from the words with an elderly theme, walked down the hallway significantly slower than the others. All this happens without any awareness. When they were questioned afterwards, none of the students reported noticing that the words had a common theme, and they all insisted that nothing they did after the first experiment could have been influenced by the words they had encountered. The idea of old age had not come into their conscious awareness, but their actions were changed nevertheless. So why do we have all these cognitive biases? Well, assuming causality has obvious evolutionary advantages, a very popular analogy used is that if our ancestors heard a bush rustle, a more rational skeptic could put it down to wind or something random about the environment, and they might be right 9 times out of 10. But in the worst case scenario, there may actually be a predator. But now they have just been dinner and are eliminated from the gene pool entirely. Therefore, our ancestors who assumed causality were more likely to survive and pass on their genetics. But what about the other cognitive biases? It's important to note that these biases of intuition does not denigrate human intelligence. Most of our judgments and actions are appropriate most of the time. Imagine weighing the pros and cons on a yellow legal pad for every single decision you ever make, then afterwards constantly second-guessing yourself. It would be incredibly effortful, energy-intensive, and time-consuming. The results from all these studies are not made up, nor are they statistical flukes. You have no choice but to accept that the major conclusions of these studies are true. More important, you must accept that they are true about you. If you have been exposed to a series of words associated with old age, you too would likely have walked down the corridor slower. You do not believe these results apply to you because they correspond with nothing in your subjective experience. But that's the entire point. These cognitive biases arise in System 1, and our thoughts, beliefs, decisions, and behaviors are all affected by these cognitive biases, whether we are aware of them or not. We have limited access to the workings of our minds, and it is difficult to accept because naturally it is alien to our experience. You know less about yourself than you feel you do. Most often, we are just observers to evaluations that your subconscious delivers. In an experiment at New York Open the door.